There are parts of us that we hide, even from ourselves, repressed impulses, denied desires, buried memories lodged deep within the unconscious. From an early age, we learn to shape ourselves to be accepted, and in the process, we leave behind fragments of who we truly are. But what is rejected doesn't disappear. It simply hides in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Whether in unexpected reactions, repetitive patterns, or the way we judge others, the shadow is always present. And the more we ignore it, the more control it has over our choices. Integrating it doesn't mean surrendering to impulses. It means understanding that even within darkness, there are forces essential to our growth. What you repress never disappears. It simply finds new ways to manifest. Who hasn't overreacted to a criticism or felt an instant dislike for someone without knowing why? These intense emotional responses are clear signs of the shadow at work. Most people believe they have control over themselves, unaware that, behind the scenes, their shadow is pulling the strings. A sudden burst of anger, repetitive relationship patterns, that inner voice sabotaging your decisions, all of these could be repressed aspects seeking an outlet. Ignoring it doesn't solve anything. On the contrary, the shadow adapts, finding even subtler and more destructive ways to influence your choices. So, the real question, one few have the courage to face, is this: do you truly know yourself, or do you only believe in the version you've constructed? If you want to uncover what's hidden in your unconscious and how it impacts your life, keep listening. Because believe me, your shadow is already at work, and if you don't see it, you will remain its prisoner. What you repress doesn't disappear. It simply finds new ways to express itself. A successful professional who ignores their anger may end up taking it out on their children. Someone who rejects their own desires might feel envious of those who live authentically. The shadow seeks balance, and everything denied eventually surfaces, often in uncontrollable ways. If you've ever found yourself repeating self-destructive patterns without understanding why, rest assured, your shadow is acting without your awareness. But the shadow doesn't just hold what you reject. It also hides talents and potential that have been suppressed over time. Many artists have discovered their creativity by exploring their darker aspect. Fear of rejection could be masking a natural leadership ability. Shame could be suppressing an authentic charisma. Jung saw shadow integration as an essential step toward personal growth, because within it lies part of our strength. If you believe your shadow doesn't influence you, it's probably the one in control. And the shadow doesn't exist only within individuals, it manifests in society as a whole. Jung called this the collective shadow, everything that a group, a culture, or even a nation prefers to ignore about itself. Think about the darkest moments in history: wars, persecutions, injustices. Many of these tragedies happened because entire societies projected their own flaws onto a group to blame. The worst part? Those in control believed they were right. When the collective shadow spreads, truth is distorted, and people begin acting irrationally without realizing it. And it's not just a thing of the past. It's present in everyday life. The media and culture fuel the collective shadow by amplifying fears and dividing people, imposing standards that separate them from their true identity. If a man grows up hearing that showing emotion is weakness, he might suppress his feelings until they manifest as outbursts of anger or emotional isolation. If society defines happiness as material possessions or an ideal appearance, many will feel inadequate without even understanding why. We absorb these beliefs unconsciously, shaping our choices around them. But when someone becomes aware of this mechanism, they begin to break free from its influence. Questioning rules, reflecting on imposed ideas, and challenging automatic patterns allow us to see reality more clearly. Have you ever stopped to ask if your opinions are truly your own? Or are they merely echoes of what you've absorbed without noticing? Awareness is the first step toward integrating the shadow, both individually and collectively. Ignoring or hiding parts of yourself may seem like an easy solution, but in reality, it creates an even bigger problem. What you repress doesn't disappear. It simply accumulates in the unconscious, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And when it does, it usually happens in unexpected and uncontrolled ways. Have you ever felt an overwhelming anger over something small? Or realized that you criticize others for the very things you struggle with yourself? This happens because the shadow refuses to be ignored. The more you try to suppress it, the more it finds ways to manifest. The problem is that these manifestations are often destructive, affecting your relationships, your emotions, and even your mental health. Repressing the shadow can make life far more difficult than it needs to be. People who avoid emotions like sadness or anger often end up feeling constantly irritated, exhausted, or unmotivated without knowing why. Some try to cope in harmful ways, through addictions, compulsions, emotional outbursts. Others project their pain onto those around them, becoming overly critical, impatient, and resentful, without realizing they are merely seeing in the external world what they refuse to acknowledge within themselves. This pattern not only damages relationships but also creates a cycle of frustration and stagnation. Guilt and fear are among the greatest obstacles to integrating the shadow. Many people were taught from an early age that feeling anger, envy, or desire is wrong, so they try to pretend these emotions don't exist. But denying a part of yourself doesn't eliminate its effect. It only creates a deeper internal conflict. True freedom begins when you accept that you have a shadow and, instead of fighting against it, learn to use it to your advantage. When you understand that the shadow is not an enemy but rather an unexplored territory within yourself, you begin to realize that it can be transformed into an ally. Many believe that the shadow only harbors the negative aspects of one's personality, but that's not true. It also contains talents, desires, and qualities that were suppressed over time. How many people abandon their passions because someone told them, "That won't make you money?" How many silence their self-expression because they were labeled as shy? Many skills and positive traits end up buried in the shadow out of fear of judgment, leading people to live without ever discovering their true potential. Integrating the shadow can bring back these forgotten parts and transform lives. Someone who has always avoided conflict might realize they have a natural ability to lead. A person who thought they lacked creativity might discover their mind is filled with innovative ideas. But this process requires courage. You must ask yourself, what have I buried inside me because I thought it wasn't good enough? More often than not, the very things we were taught to hide are what would make us more authentic and fulfilled. To access this potential, start by paying attention to the signs. What sparks your envy in others? What secretly brings you joy, but you've never had the courage to admit? What did you do effortlessly as a child but abandoned over the years? These clues can reveal dormant strengths within you, waiting to be awakened. Integrating them might be the first step to breaking free from autopilot and living with more authenticity. The shadow doesn't give warnings before it manifests. It hides in the details of everyday life. Often, it appears in exaggerated reactions, like when something small triggers an outsized irritation. If someone deeply annoys you because they always want to be the center of attention, it could be that, deep down, you also have a desire to express yourself more but have repressed it. Another classic sign of the shadow is projection, when you attribute to others traits or intentions that actually reflect aspects of yourself that you prefer to ignore. If you see arrogance everywhere, you might be denying your own need to assert yourself. If you see deception all around you, it could be that you struggle to accept your own vulnerability. Another space where the shadow reveals itself is in dreams. Jung believed that the unconscious communicates through them, revealing hidden aspects of the psyche. Have you ever dreamed of arguing with someone or running from something? It could be a sign that you're avoiding an internal conflict. Repetitive dreams, or those featuring unknown figures, may also carry important messages. Observing and reflecting on these symbols can help uncover repressed parts of yourself. A useful exercise is to write down your dreams upon waking and analyze the emotions they evoke. The shadow can also manifest as self-sabotage. Have you ever been close to achieving something important, only to suddenly do something that ruined everything? This behavior happens because the shadow fears change. Often, without realizing it, you might be holding yourself back from growth. This can show up in procrastination, impulsive decisions, or the repetition of destructive habits. The more aware you become of these patterns, the easier it will be to prevent the shadow from controlling your life without your knowledge. The idea of evil often seems external, something that exists in others but never in ourselves. However, Jung warned that ignoring one's own shadow is what truly makes people vulnerable to destructive behavior. The danger isn't in acknowledging that darkness exists within you, it's in pretending it doesn't. Just look at history. Some of the worst atrocities were committed by those who believed they were the good ones. When someone is convinced they are entirely right and that all evil exists only in others, they open the door to committing injustices in the name of false morality. The collective shadow has the power to shape entire societies. In times of crisis, certain groups are demonized so that the rest of the population has a villain to blame. This has happened countless times throughout history. Persecuted minorities, wars justified by ideology, and even hatred fueled through social media. Mass manipulation thrives on this phenomenon, dividing and controlling people, because projecting darkness onto others is far easier than admitting that everyone carries aspects within themselves that need to be understood. The real challenge is recognizing that the shadow exists within each of us. This doesn't mean giving in to negative impulses, but rather becoming conscious of them before they spiral out of control. When someone represses their own aggression, it can erupt at the worst moments. When they deny their envy, they might become overly critical and resentful. The goal isn't to eliminate the shadow, that's impossible, but rather to integrate it so that it doesn't take over your life. After all, the more someone tries to appear perfect, the more they become a prisoner of everything they are trying to hide from themselves. Facing the shadow is not comfortable, but it is essential for anyone who wants to have control over their own life. Many people avoid it, believing that this makes them good, but that is precisely the mistake that gives it more power. The more you pretend that certain thoughts and emotions don't exist, the more they influence your behavior without you realizing it. Instead of running away, the path is to observe yourself. What bothers you in others? What causes you deep discomfort? What do you avoid at all costs? The answers to these questions can reveal repressed parts of yourself that need to be acknowledged. Accepting the shadow does not mean giving in to destructive impulses, but rather learning how to deal with them. Someone who recognizes their anger can channel it in a healthy way through sports, writing, or meditation. Someone who admits to feeling envy can use it as a signal that they desire something for themselves and start taking action to achieve it. The problem is not the emotion itself, but how we handle it. The shadow becomes dangerous when it is denied. Those who truly know themselves are not slaves to impulsive reactions or self-destructive patterns, because they understand where they come from and know how to transform them. Self-observation is fundamental in this process. There are many ways to practice it. Therapy, reflective writing, meditation, or even honest conversations with yourself. When you stop running from the shadow and start confronting it, you realize that it is not an enemy but a part of you that wants to be understood. This process may feel uncomfortable at first, but it is transformative. Only those who have the courage to face their own darkness can live with authenticity. And the best part? Those who integrate their shadow become stronger, more self-aware, and less susceptible to external manipulation. Understanding the shadow is a big step, but applying it in real life is what truly makes a difference. For that, there is a simple exercise: the dialogue with the shadow. Take a notebook or your phone and write down a question for yourself, such as, "What irritated me the most today?" or "What criticism deeply bothered me?" Then, try to answer without filters, as if you were having a conversation with a hidden part of yourself. It may feel strange at first, but this method brings to the surface thoughts and emotions that usually remain concealed. Another effective way to work with the shadow is to observe your projections. Whenever you feel an intense discomfort towards someone, ask yourself, could this trait exist in me in some way? Often, what irritates us the most in others reflects something we have repressed within ourselves. Instead of judging or pushing that feeling away, try to understand it. This does not mean accepting negative behaviors from others, but rather gaining clarity about your own reactions and emotions. The final stage of this process is acceptance. After identifying an aspect of your shadow, ask yourself, how can I use this in a constructive way? If you notice you have repressed anger, you can channel it into standing up for yourself when necessary. If you feel envy, you can use it as a sign to seek positive changes in your life. Working with the shadow is not about eliminating it, but learning to use it to your advantage. The more you practice this integration, the more self-aware you become, and the less you are controlled by your own emotions. The shadow is always present, whether you recognize it or not. The problem is not having it but ignoring it. Everything you repress finds a way to manifest, and usually in the worst possible way. Now that you understand how it operates, the question is, will you continue letting it control you, or will you learn to use it for growth? If you want to gain a deeper understanding of yourself and unlock your hidden potential, I invite you to explore my exclusive ebook, Alchemy and Archetypes, Exploring Inner Transformation Through Jungian Psychology. This unique material I created contains practical exercises that reveal the secrets of Jungian psychology and how to integrate them into your life. I'm not promising to solve all your problems, but I am offering a guide that can help you and lead you to something much greater. And if this content resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications.